The myth comes to life. Lieutenant Syria sat at her station aboard the Xiren warship Vertok, watching the endless stretch of space on her screen. The patrol route was quiet, as always. Nothing ever happened this deep in the void. The humans were gone, wiped out centuries ago. Their name only existed in old war records and bedtime horror stories. She sighed, stretching her stiff arms. The ship's radar was clean. Until suddenly, a small blip appeared on the edge of the screen. Syria frowned. That sector was empty. Nothing but dead space. No stations, no ships, no life. Her fingers danced over the console, zooming in on the unknown object. It was moving slowly, almost like it was watching them. But something was strange. Its energy signature didn't match any known Xiren ships. It didn't match any known species. A cold shiver ran down her spine. She tapped her communicator. "Commander Killer, there's an unidentified ship on the radar." Static filled the line before the deep voice of Commander Killer responded. "A pirate. The lost trader." "I don't think so," Syria said. "The ship is strange. I'm running scans now." She activated the deep scan, waiting as the system analyzed the object. A few seconds later, her screen filled with results. Her heart nearly stopped when she read the data. The ship's structure was old. Very old. Its design matched something from the war archives, something from a time when the Xirans fought against their most feared enemy. Humans. Syria's mouth went dry. That was impossible. Humans were extinct. The Xiren Empire had wiped them out. Everyone knew that. She double-checked the readings. No errors. No mistakes. The ship was human-made. Her claws tightened on the edge of the console. This couldn't be real. It had to be a trick. Maybe an old wreck drifting through space. But no, this ship was active. "Commander," she said, her voice low. "You need to see this." A few moments later, the heavy doors behind her slid open, and Commander Killer stepped inside. His yellow eyes narrowed as he walked toward her station. "What is it, Lieutenant?" Syria pointed at the screen. "This ship, it has a human energy signature." Killer's expression hardened. "That's not possible." "I thought so too," she said. "But the data is clear." Keeler stared at the radar, his jaw tightening. Then, after a long pause, he scoffed. "It must be an old wreck, drifting aimlessly. Or worse, a rebel trick, using ancient human technology to confuse us." Syria wasn't convinced. The ship's movements were too precise, too calculated. "Should we hail them?" she asked. Keeler shook his head. "No. If it's hostile, we don't want to give away our position." Syria hesitated, then glanced back at the screen. The ship was still there, watching them. Then, without warning, it vanished. Syria's eyes widened. What? Where did it go? She frantically tapped on the controls, running another scan, but the ship was gone. No wreckage. No energy trails. It had disappeared like a ghost. Keeler frowned. "I knew it. Just a glitch in the system. Probably a false reading." Syria wasn't so sure. She had seen the readings with her own eyes. That ship was real. Her hands trembled as she rewound the data logs, trying to find something, anything, that proved she wasn't imagining things. Then her screen flickered. A low, static-filled sound came through her speakers. A transmission. The language was garbled, unreadable. But Syria's instincts told her one thing. It was human. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. The myths were real. The humans were still out there. And they had just made contact. Syria couldn't sleep. The transmission haunted her. It was brief, distorted, and impossible to translate. But she felt something in it. A presence. A warning. She replayed it over and over in her quarters, isolating frequencies, filtering out the static. It wasn't just random noise. There was a pattern. A voice. But no one on the ship believed her. Commander Killer dismissed the entire event as a sensor malfunction, telling the crew to forget about the so-called human ship. He even locked access to the radar logs, as if erasing the data could erase the truth. Syria knew better. That ship was real. The message was real. And if the humans had survived all these centuries in hiding, they had a reason. She had to know why. Syria waited for the ship's night cycle, when most of the crew were either asleep or busy in the lower decks. She snuck into the restricted archive room, using her access codes to override the security lock. If the humans were back, she needed to know everything the Xiran Empire had buried about them. The archives were ancient, filled with war reports, old battle footage, and classified documents. She skimmed through countless files detailing the human Xiran war, but everything was written from the Xiran perspective. Humans were described as relentless, unpredictable, dangerous, a species that fought to the bitter end, even when they were outnumbered, even when surrender was the logical choice. But something didn't make sense. The war reports claimed the Xirans had wiped out humanity completely, yet there were no records of their homeworld's destruction. No confirmed final battle. Just silence. As if the humans had simply vanished. Syria's claws tapped the console as she searched deeper. What if the Empire never truly won? What if humanity had survived, waiting in the dark, preparing for a return? A cold chill ran down her spine. Then a warning alert flashed across her screen. Unauthorized access detected. Security override in progress. Syria cursed under her breath and quickly shut down the terminal. She had to move. But as she turned to leave, the ship shuddered. A ripple ran through the walls, subtle but undeniable. She felt it in her bones. Syria bolted to the command deck. By the time she arrived, alarms were flashing red. Officers scrambled at their stations, confusion spreading through the crew. Commander Keller stood near the viewing screen, his face pale with disbelief. "What's happening?" Syria asked, pushing through the gathered officers. Keeler didn't turn to look at her. He simply pointed at the screen. Syria's breath caught in her throat. The human ship was back. It hung just outside of weapons range, still and silent, watching. But this time, it wasn't alone. A second human vessel had appeared, larger than the first. Then a third, and a fourth. Syria's pulse pounded. How many more were out there, hidden in the darkness? A new transmission crackled through the speakers, clearer this time. It was still in human language, but now Syria could hear the tone. It wasn't a greeting. It was a warning. Keeler growled, "They're testing us." Syria looked at him sharply. "How do you know?" "Because this is what we used to do," Keller muttered, his voice grim. "Back when we were the hunters, and they were the prey." For the first time, Syria saw something in her commander's eyes that she had never seen before. Fear. The bridge fell silent as the human ships began to move. Syria clenched her fists. This wasn't a sensor glitch. This wasn't a mistake. The myths were wrong. The war was unfinished. And humanity was back. A cold silence filled the bridge. Every Xiran officer stood frozen, eyes locked onto the four human ships now circling them like predators. The humans made no attempt to attack, no sudden movements, no threats. But their presence alone was enough to send a wave of unease through the crew. Syria's heart pounded. She could barely breathe. It was like standing in front of a ghost, a legend brought to life. Commander Keller's voice was tense. "Weapons ready. Do not fire unless I give the order." Syria's head snapped toward him. "Weapons? Are you serious? We don't even know what they want." Keller's yellow eyes burned with authority. "I know what humans want, Lieutenant. Survival. Revenge. Do you really believe they would let us live if they had the chance to destroy us?" Syria's claws tightened around the console. He was wrong. The humans had already won. They had been hiding, watching, waiting. If they wanted to erase the Xirans from existence, they would have done it by now. A soft beep interrupted her thoughts. Another transmission. This time, the words were clearer, still distorted, still alien, but now recognizable. The bridge fell silent as the translation system kicked in. A deep, calm voice filled the air. "We do not wish for war, but we will not hide anymore." Syria felt a shiver run down her spine. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. Some looked relieved. Others, like Kaylor, only grew more suspicious. "They're lying," Keller said, his voice cold. "Humans always lie." Syria turned toward him, anger bubbling in her chest. "And what if they're not? What if this is our chance to fix what was broken?" Keylor ignored her. He stepped forward and sent a transmission back. "This is Commander Kaylor of the Siren Empire," he said firmly. "Your presence in this sector is a direct violation of Imperial space. Leave immediately." Static filled the speakers. Then the human voice returned. "We were here before you. This space belongs to no one." The words sent a shockwave through the crew. The humans weren't just challenging them. They were making a claim. Killer's expression darkened. He turned to the weapons officer. "Target the lid ship." Syria's stomach dropped. "What are you doing?" "They haven't fired at us." "They're testing us," Killer growled. "If we show weakness, they'll strike. The only thing humans respect is strength." Syria couldn't let this happen. Before the officer could lock weapons, she disabled the targeting system with a swift override command. Keeler whirled toward her, furious. "Stand down, Lieutenant." Syria held her ground. "No, you're making a mistake." The tension in the room was suffocating. The other officers stared, unsure who to obey. Then, something happened that no one expected. The lead human ship powered down its weapons. One by one, the others followed. Their shields remained up, but their actions were clear. They weren't here for a fight. A new transmission came through. "You do not know the full truth. Meet us, and we will show you." Keeler bared his teeth. An invitation. This is a trap. Syria, however, saw something else. An opportunity. Her voice was steady when she spoke. "Then let me be the one to go." Keeler laughed bitterly. "You? You think you can handle humans alone. I think I'm the only one here who's actually listening to them." A long pause followed. Keeler's glare could have burned through steel, but Syria didn't waver. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, he let out a frustrated growl. "Fine, but don't expect a rescue when they turn on you." Syria ignored the threat and turned back to the console. She had made her choice. The myths were wrong. The war wasn't over, and she was about to face the truth, no matter what it was. Syria stood at the airlock, heart pounding in her chest. The human ship loomed ahead, its dark metal hull scarred with centuries of survival. No grand insignia, no flashing lights, just a silent, waiting presence. Her Siren shuttle hummed softly as it drifted closer. The docking clamps engaged with a dull thunk, sealing her fate. Behind her, the ship's communicator crackled. Killer's voice came through, sharp and cold. "You have 1 hour, Lieutenant. If you don't check in, we assume you're dead." Syria exhaled slowly. She wouldn't die. Not today. She stepped forward, the airlock hissing open. Inside, the human ship was dark, dimmer than Siren vessels. The air was heavier, filled with a strange scent. Not unpleasant, but different. Metal, oil, something almost ancient. Then, from the shadows, a figure stepped forward. A human. Syria had studied old records, watched war footage, but seeing one in real life was different. He was taller than she expected, his posture relaxed but ready, like a predator that didn't need to prove its dominance. His eyes, sharp and calculating, studied her with the same intensity she gave him. He spoke first. "You're brave to come here alone." Syria kept her stance firm. "You're bold to invite me." The human smirked. "Fair enough." He gestured forward. "Come. There's something you need to see." She hesitated for only a moment before following him deeper into the ship. The halls were tight, utilitarian. Nothing wasted. Every panel, every screen, every bolt had a purpose. These were not the luxurious, decorated halls of Xyren warships. This was a survivor's vessel. The human led her into a chamber where a holographic display flickered to life. It wasn't a map, nor a battle plan. It was a history, and as Syria watched, her entire understanding of the past shattered. The Xyrens always claimed they won the war, that humans were wiped out, their worlds burned, that the Empire stood victorious. But the images in front of her told another story. Fleets of human ships vanishing, not destroyed. Massive colonies hidden away in deep space, in regions the Xyrens never searched. Humans escaping, preparing. The final battle. The one that supposedly ended humanity. It wasn't a last stand. It was a calculated retreat. Syria's breath caught. You let us think you were gone. The human's expression was unreadable. Would your empire have stopped hunting us if you knew the truth? Syria clenched her fists. Why now? Why reveal yourselves? The human's smirk faded. His next words sent a chill through her. Because we're not the only ones who survived. The hologram shifted, showing something else. Ships that weren't human, that weren't Xyren. A third force, unknown, lurking beyond the edges of explored space. Syria's stomach twisted. How long have you known? The human's gaze was heavy, long enough to know that your empire isn't ready. Syria's mind raced. This changed everything. The Xyrens weren't the rulers of the galaxy. They weren't even the strongest force in it. The humans had stayed hidden for a reason. And now, that reason was knocking at the door. Her communicator buzzed. Killer's voice. Syria. Report. She swallowed hard, staring at the images before her. What did she say? That the humans were alive? That they had outmaneuvered the Empire for centuries? That a greater threat was on the horizon? She had come here searching for answers. But now she realized. She was standing at the edge of a war they never saw coming. Syria stared at the holographic display, her mind racing. The human's words echoed in her head. We're not the only ones who survived. On the screen, dark, jagged ships moved like shadows through the void. Their designs were alien, unlike anything Syria had ever seen. Not Xyren, not human. Something older. Her communicator buzzed again. Killer. Syria. Report. She hesitated. How could she explain this in a way he wouldn't dismiss? If she told him outright, he'd assume the humans were lying, trying to manipulate her. The human beside her, his name was Reyes, she had learned, watched her carefully. He could see the war within her. Your commander won't believe you, he said. But we don't have time for that. Syria exhaled sharply. He was right. She tapped her communicator, still gathering information. We'll report soon. A long silence. Then Keller's sharp response. Make it fast. The line went dead. Reyes tilted his head. Risky move. Syria shot him a look. Telling him the full truth right now would be riskier. Reyes smirked, approving. He tapped the console, zooming in on the unknown ships in the hologram. Their hulls seemed to shift, absorbing light rather than reflecting it, almost like they were part of the void itself. They'd been out there a long time, Reyes said. Waiting, watching, moving in ways we don't fully understand. Syria crossed her arms. And now they're moving toward us. Reyes nodded. They started pushing into human-controlled regions first. Isolated ships. Outer colonies. At first, we thought they were just testing us. Syria frowned. Testing. Reyes's jaw tightened. They don't attack like your empire. No fleet engagements. No demands. They don't conquer. They consume. Syria felt a chill crawl up her spine. Clarify, she said, voice quieter now. Reyes adjusted the hologram again. Footage appeared. Grainy, but clear enough. A human freighter floating in space. No signs of damage. Just drifting. Its lights flickering. A second ship, one of the unknowns, moved alongside it. No weapons fired, no explosions. But then, right before Syria's eyes, the human ship began to decay. Not explode, not break apart. It was as if the metal itself was rotting, crumbling into dust, piece by piece. Syria's breath hitched. What? What is that? Reyes's expression darkened. We don't know. But it isn't just metal. It happens to people too. Syria felt her claws dig into her palms. This wasn't war. This was something else. A slow, silent erasure. She swallowed hard. Why are you telling me this? Why not just let my empire walk blindly into this? Reyes leaned forward, his gaze sharp. Because we're not your enemy, Syria. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Syria wanted to deny it, to argue that the humans had to have some hidden agenda. But deep down, she already knew the truth. The war between their species, it didn't matter anymore. A greater enemy was already at the doorstep. And the Xyrans weren't ready. She forced herself to stay calm. What do you want from me? Reyes didn't hesitate. For you to convince your people before it's too late. Syria exhaled slowly. That was easier said than done. Killer wouldn't listen. The Empire wouldn't listen. They had spent centuries believing humans were gone, that the Xyrans ruled uncontested. But that illusion was about to be shattered. She met Reyes's eyes. Then tell me everything. If she had any chance of stopping a catastrophe, she needed all the information. Reyes nodded, turning back to the console. As more files loaded onto the screen, Syria realized something chilling. This wasn't just an oncoming war. This was the aftermath of something bigger. Something ancient. Something that had already erased civilizations before them. And if they didn't act fast, they would be next. Syria sat in the dimly lit chamber of the human vessel, her mind racing as new information unfolded before her. The holographic display flickered, revealing star maps, fleet movements, and distress signals from the edges of known space. Each file Reyes pulled up told the same story, a creeping extinction, slow and inevitable. The unknown enemy wasn't just moving, it was devouring. Whole colonies lost. Ships found eerily intact, but with no crew. Even automated systems had been stripped of their intelligence, as if something had reached inside and erased their existence. Reyes's voice was low, controlled. We call them the Vanishers. Syria felt a chill. The Xyrans had faced enemies before, fought wars, but nothing like this. She clenched her fists. Why now? Why are they attacking now? Reyes exhaled. We don't know. Maybe they were always there, lurking in the dark. Maybe something woke them up. His gaze hardened. But we do know one thing. They don't just destroy. Syria's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Reyes tapped the hologram. The footage shifted, showing an abandoned outpost. A human colony, one that had gone dark months ago. The buildings were still standing, untouched. No fires, no destruction. But there were no bodies, no signs of a fight. Just emptiness. Like everyone had simply stopped existing. Syria's breath caught. You think they're being taken. Reyes's voice was grim. We think they're being used. Syria shook her head. For what? Reyes hesitated. Then he turned to another screen, bringing up data far older than the others. Ancient records, not human, not Xyran. Something older than both their civilizations. These, Reyes said, aren't the first signs of the Vanishers. We found evidence, ruins, artifacts, from dead species, civilizations that predate both of us. Syria leaned forward, eyes locked onto the data. You're saying they've done this before? Reyes nodded. Many times. Syria's claws gripped the edge of the console. That Xyran Empire prided itself on being the dominant force in the galaxy, the victors of countless wars. But this enemy, it didn't conquer. It erased. She inhaled sharply. Why didn't you warn us sooner? Reyes's expression darkened. Would you have believed us? Syria opened her mouth to argue, but stopped. He was right. The Empire had spent centuries convinced that humanity was gone, that they had been defeated. If the situation were reversed, if a human envoy had come to a Xiran fleet claiming an unknown force was hunting them, would Kelor have listened? Would the High Command have taken it seriously? Syria swallowed hard. No. Ray studied her reaction carefully. But now that you've seen it, do you believe it? Syria forced herself to meet his gaze. Yes. She didn't want to, but she did. Ray's shoulders relaxed slightly. Then we need a plan. Syria straightened. We need proof. Something I can take back to my fleet, to the Empire. Something they can't ignore. Ray's nodded. We have that. He pulled up one last file. A location. Syria's eyes narrowed. What is this? Ray's expression was grim. A Xiran colony. Syria stiffened. That's impossible. No Xiran worlds have reported attacks. Ray shook his head. Not yet. But this one went dark 3 days ago. A chill ran through her. The Empire hadn't even noticed. She turned to him, jaw clenched. You're saying my people are already being targeted. Ray's met her gaze evenly. I'm saying your people might already be gone. Silence stretched between them. Syria's mind raced. If this was true, if the Vanishers had already begun their attack, then the Empire had no idea what was coming. And by the time they realized, it would be too late. She took a deep breath. There's only one way to find out. Ray's nodded. Then we leave now. Syria didn't hesitate. She turned toward the exit. No more delays. No more doubts. They needed to see the truth with their own eyes. Because if the Xirans had already been erased, then no one was safe. The Xiran colony floated in the void, silent and lifeless. Syria's shuttle approached cautiously, its engines humming softly against the vast emptiness of space. She had seen abandoned outposts before, ruins of war, planets razed by the Empire's enemies. But this was something different. There were no scars of battle, no collapsed structures, no debris fields. The colony looked intact, untouched. And that was what terrified her the most. Ray sat beside her, his expression tense as he scanned the readouts. No distress signals, no life signs, but power is still running. Syria's claws tapped against the console. This doesn't make sense. If there was an attack, there should be damage. If there was an evacuation, there should be records. Ray's didn't look away from the display. The Vanishers don't leave records. A chill ran through Syria. They had seen the footage. Ships dissolving. Colonies going silent, as if the people had never existed. She exhaled slowly. We need to see inside. Ray's gave a sharp nod. We go in, gather evidence, and get out. We don't split up. We don't touch anything we don't understand. Syria shot him a wry glance. You think I'd be that reckless? Ray smirked, but there was no humor in his eyes. I've seen people get too curious before. They didn't make it back. The docking procedure was uneventful, the ship's airlock sealing against the colony's hangar. Everything was functional. The lights still flickered. Doors still operated. But there was no one there. Syria tightened her grip on her pulse rifle as she stepped onto the cold metal floor. The silence pressed against her like a physical weight. No sounds of machinery. No voices. Nothing. Ray's moved beside her, his own weapon ready. Stay alert. They made their way through the corridors, past rooms that should have been filled with scientists, officers, workers. Everything remained in place, unfinished meals on tables, half-written reports on screens, as if the colony had been abandoned in an instant. Syria swallowed hard. They were here. But where did they go? Then, something flickered in the distance. A shadow. Syria froze. Did you see that? Ray's nodded slowly. Yeah. They moved forward carefully, following the corridor until they reached a control room. The monitors were still active, cycling through security footage. Syria stepped closer, scanning the recordings. Then she saw it. The moment it happened. The footage showed people going about their tasks, scientists at terminals, engineers repairing systems. Then, without warning, they stopped. Not in alarm, not in fear. They simply froze. Then, one by one, they began to vanish. Not disintegrating, not evaporating. They faded like mist in the wind. Syria's blood ran cold. What in the void is this? Reyes rewound the footage, playing it again. The same thing happened. No sign of pain. No struggle. Just erasure. His voice was tight. They weren't killed. They were taken. Syria clenched her fists. But taken where? And by what? Then the lights flickered. The temperature in the room dropped. Reyes stiffened. Did you feel that? Syria barely had time to nod before a voice, a whisper, low and distorted, echoed through the control room. You are not supposed to be here. Her heart pounded. Who's there? Silence. Then the monitors glitched. The security footage distorted. A new shape appeared on the screen. Something tall, shrouded in darkness, standing in the very corridor they had just walked through. Syria turned sharply, pulse rifle raised. But the hallway was empty. Reyes cursed under his breath. We need to move. Now. Syria didn't argue. They rushed back through the corridors, retracing their steps. The walls felt closer, the air thicker. The station no longer felt abandoned. It felt watched. Then, just as they reached the hangar, the lights went out. Total darkness. Syria's breath was steady, but her muscles were coiled. She activated her visor's night vision, scanning the area, and froze. Something stood between them and the ship. Tall, still, its shape barely visible, like a ripple in space itself. Not human, not Suran. Something else. Syria's pulse pounded in her ears. She could feel it watching, studying. Then, without moving, without sound, it was suddenly closer. Reyes grabbed her arm. We have to run. Syria didn't hesitate. They bolted toward the ship, moving fast, ignoring everything else. The thing didn't chase them. It didn't need to. As the airlock sealed behind them, and the engines roared to life, Syria dared a final glance at the colony below. For the first time, she understood. The Vanishers didn't fight wars. They didn't leave wreckage. They simply unmade what they wanted. And if they weren't stopped, the Xerans and humans would be next.